I, 42, F, thought my life was as close to perfect as a life could be. My daughter Emily, who was my entire world, was 22 and about to make me a grandmother. We were at her baby shower, held in the backyard of the house my grandmother had left me. The sun was warm, the garden was in full bloom, and the air was filled with the happy chatter of friends and family. My husband Mark was playing the part of the proud future grandfather perfectly, mingling with guests and keeping everyone's glasses full. He caught my eye from across the lawn and smiled, a familiar, warm smile that I had known for 25 years. I smiled back, feeling a surge of contentment. Everything was right. Everything was exactly as it should be. My sister Chloe was there, of course. She was 6 years younger than me and had always been the center of attention, the whirlwind of drama in our otherwise calm family. She floated through the party in a dress that was a little too bright, her laughter a little too loud. She hugged Mark for a little too long when she arrived, a gesture I registered with a familiar, faint annoyance. They had always been overly familiar, but I had long ago dismissed it as just Chloe being Chloe. She craved validation, and Mark, ever the charmer, was always happy to provide it. I watched them for a moment, a tiny, uncomfortable knot tightening in my stomach before I forced it to dissolve. Today was not about Chloe and her need for the spotlight. It was about Emily. Emily was glowing. She sat in a wicker chair decorated with pink and blue ribbons, her hands resting on her beautiful round belly. She laughed as she opened another gift, a tiny pair of hand-knitted booties from her great-aunt. The pile of presents around her was a testament to how loved she was, how loved this new baby already was. My heart felt so full it might burst. This was the culmination of everything I had worked for, everything I had built. A happy, loving family, a secure home, a daughter who was about to embark on the same incredible journey of motherhood that had brought me so much joy. After most of the gifts had been opened, Chloe stood up. She picked up a champagne flute and tapped it with her fingernail. The light chatter died down as everyone turned to look at her. A toast, I presumed. She had a on Mark. Her smile tightened just a fraction. It's made me realize that it's time for me to embrace some of that happiness for myself, to finally get the family I've always deserved. A few people looked confused. This was an odd turn for a baby shower toast. I felt that uncomfortable knot in my stomach return, tighter this time. What was she doing? This was Emily's day. Chloe took a deep breath, placing a hand dramatically on her own flat stomach. The truth is, she said, her voice dropping just enough to make everyone lean in, I have some news of my own. I'm pregnant, too. A wave of surprised gasps and happy exclamations went through the crowd. My mother clapped her hands together in delight. I was stunned. Chloe had never even mentioned she was dating anyone seriously, but before I could process my own shock, or the slight sting of her choosing to announce this at my daughter's party, she delivered the final, devastating blow. She turned her head slowly, her gaze locking directly onto my husband, Mark. A cruel, triumphant smirk played on her lips. I'm pregnant too, she repeated, her voice ringing out with chilling clarity across the suddenly silent yard, but with his baby. And then, the world stopped. The birds stopped singing. The gentle breeze died. The soft murmur of the party ceased to exist. All that remained was a profound, echoing silence. Every single eye in that garden swiveled from Chloe to Mark. I watched his face, my heart pounding a slow, heavy drumbeat in my ears. I saw the color drain from his cheeks. I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes. I saw the guilt. What I did not see was denial. He did not shout that she was crazy. He did not laugh it off as a sick joke. He just stood there, frozen, a statue of his own betrayal. And in that deafening silence, I knew it was true. My perfect life, my happy family, my entire world shattered into a million pieces right there on the pristine green lawn. The sound of my daughter's choked sob was what finally broke the spell. I tore my eyes away from Mark's guilty face and looked at Emily. Tears were streaming down her cheeks, her hands clutching her belly as if to protect her unborn child from the poison that had just contaminated our lives. A cold rage, so pure and so intense it felt like ice. Horrified curiosity. They couldn't get away fast enough. My parents, Carol and Richard, hovered near me, their faces etched with shock and confusion. My mother kept whispering, "Sarah, what's happening?" It must be a mistake. I couldn't answer her. I couldn't speak. I could only stand there, watching the wreckage of my life as people scurried away from the blast zone. Mark and Chloe left separately. Chloe walked out with her head held high, a defiant tilt to her chin, as if she were the victor in a battle I didn't even know we were fighting. Mark stumbled away, not looking at me, not looking at anyone. He looked like a coward. He looked like a stranger. Soon, only a few people remained. My parents, my best friend Jessica, and my devastated daughter. The yard was a ghost town, littered with half-eaten plates of food, abandoned champagne flutes, and the colorful, mocking pile of baby gifts. The festive decorations now seemed grotesque, a cruel joke. I finally moved, walking over to Emily, who was being held by my father. I wrapped my arms around her, holding my weeping daughter as my own tears remained stubbornly locked away. "I'm so sorry, sweetie," I whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry this happened on your day." She just cried harder, her body shaking with sobs. "How could he, Mom?" How could she? I had no answers. I just held her, my mind a blank, echoing cavern of pain. Jessica quietly began to clear the plates. My mother stood frozen, wringing her hands, while my father led Emily inside, away from the scene of the crime. I stood alone in the backyard for a long time, staring at the empty wicker chair where my daughter had been sitting, so full of joy just moments before. The silence that Chloe had created with her announcement had returned, but now it was filled with the weight of everything I had lost. That first night was a long, dark tunnel with no end in sight. After I managed to get Emily settled in her old bedroom, giving her a mild sedative the doctor had approved for pregnancy, I finally allowed myself to stop being the strong mother. I walked back into the living room, which was now spotless. Jessica had cleaned everything, erasing all traces of down the seconds of my ruined life. "What do I do, Jess?" I finally whispered into the quiet room. "What am I supposed to do now?" Jessica turned to look at me, her eyes clear and determined. "First," she said, "you're going to breathe. Just focus on that, in and out. Then tomorrow, you're going to let yourself get angry. Very, very angry. And after that," she paused, her lips setting into a thin, hard line. "After that, you get even." Her words struck a chord deep inside me. Even. The thought was foreign, but it was also a lifeline. It was a purpose. It was something to focus on beyond the all-consuming pain. It was the first step out of the tunnel. Mark's attempts to contact me began before the sun came up. My phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand, a string of text messages. "Sarah, please pick up. We need to talk. This is all a huge misunderstanding. She's twisting things." Then the calls started. I stared at his name on the screen, a name that had once meant safety and love, and felt nothing but a cold, hollow emptiness. I silenced the phone and rolled over, but sleep was impossible. He showed up at the house later that morning. I was in the kitchen making tea I had no intention of drinking when the doorbell rang. I knew it was him. I saw his car through the window. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. He looked terrible. His hair was a mess, his eyes were red-rimmed, and he was wearing the same clothes from yesterday. A part of me, a deeply buried, foolish part, felt a flicker of pity. I crushed it instantly. He rang the bell again, then started knocking. "Sarah! Please, just let me in. Let me explain." I spoke through the closed door, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "There is nothing to explain, Mark. I saw your face yesterday. That was all the explanation I needed. "It's not what you think," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Chloe, she's manipulative. She planned this. She trapped me." "Did she trap you into sleeping with her?" I asked, the words tasting like acid. "Did she trap you for months? Years? How long, Mark?" Sitting in a heavy, uncomfortable silence. My mother, Carol, rushed to me as soon as I walked in, her face a mask of distress. "Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry. This is just a nightmare," she said, trying to hug me. I allowed the embrace for a moment before gently pulling away. I wasn't there for comfort. I was there for clarity. "Is it true?" my father Richard asked from his armchair. His voice was grim. He had always been a man of few words, but his disappointment was a palpable force in the room. "Yes," I said simply. Mark didn't deny it. My mother started fluttering her hands, a nervous habit she had whenever things were unpleasant. "But are you sure? Chloe can be so dramatic. She exaggerates. Maybe she's not even pregnant. Maybe she's just saying it to get attention." I stared at her, a bitter frustration rising in my throat. This was her default setting. For my entire life, Chloe's bad behavior had been excused, smoothed over, and repackaged as drama or a cry for help. My role had always been to be the stable one, the one who understood, the one who kept the peace. "Mom, stop," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Stop making excuses for her." She stood up in front of my friends, in front of our family, and announced she was pregnant with my husband's child. There is no exaggerating that, and even if she were lying about the baby, which she isn't, he still slept with her. He betrayed me. He betrayed Emily. "But your family," she whispered, her eyes pleading. "Your marriage." 25 years. "My marriage is over," I stated, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. "And right now, I'm not sure I have a sister anymore either." My father finally spoke up, his voice heavy. "Your mother is just in shock, Sarah. We both are. What Chloe did, and what Mark did, it's unforgivable." He looked at my mother pointedly. "There is no smoothing this over, Carol. Our daughter's life has been blown apart." My mother sank into a chair, finally looking defeated. Seeing my father's quiet, unwavering support was a small comfort, but my mother's instinct to protect Chloe, even now, had carved a new wound. It showed me just how alone I had been in this family dynamic. It wasn't just a betrayal born of passion. This was malicious. This was cruel. Chloe didn't just want my husband. She wanted to destroy me in the process. I took a deep breath. The anger Jessica had predicted now roaring to life, burning away the pain and leaving something hard and resolute in its place. I blocked the number. I looked up at my parents. "I'm going to see a lawyer," I said, my voice clear and strong. "I'm done crying. I'm done being the victim. He and she, they are not going to get away with this. I'm going to take everything." The shock wore off within a few days, replaced by a cold, methodical resolve. The hurt was still there, a constant, dull ache beneath the surface, but it was no longer paralyzing. It was fuel. Every time I pictured Chloe's triumphant smirk or Mark's guilty face, the fire inside me burned hotter. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to win. Jessica gave me the name of a divorce lawyer, a man named Mr. Henderson who was known for being a shark. I made an appointment for the next day. Walking into his polished, intimidating office felt like stepping into a different life, a life where I had to fight for what was mine. Mr. Henderson was an older man with sharp eyes and a calm, reassuring demeanor that belied his reputation. He listened patiently as I recounted the story of the baby shower, my voice never wavering. I laid out the facts simply and without emotion. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "This is, for lack of a better word, messy," he said, his tone professional. "But it is also very clear-cut. Adultery is a factor, and a child resulting from that adultery strengthens your position considerably." We talked about the assets, the business Mark and I had started together, the savings, the investments. Then he asked about the house. "The house is in my name alone," I told him. It was left to me by my grandmother. Mark's name has never been on the deed. Mr. Henderson's eyebrows shot up. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "Well," he said, leaning back in his chair, "that is a very significant piece of leverage. A very significant piece indeed." He explained the next steps. He advised me to start quietly untangling, no longer just reacting to the bomb that had been dropped on my life. I was starting to build my own arsenal. That night, after Emily was asleep, I sat down at the dining room table with my laptop and a pot of coffee. It was time to go digging. I started with the joint credit card statements. For hours, I scrolled through line after line of charges: groceries, gas, utility bills. It was a mundane record of our shared life, and each familiar entry felt like a small betrayal. Then I started to see them. Small things at first. A charge for a dinner at an expensive restaurant downtown on a night Mark had told me he was working late. A charge for flowers from a fancy florist, flowers I had never received. 2 tickets to a concert I had wanted to go to, but he'd said were sold out. The small deceptions, the casual lies, stung in their own way. They showed me that this wasn't just about Chloe. This was a pattern of disrespect that had been going on for a long time. I moved on to the main bank account. I sorted the transactions by date, going back 2 full years as Mr. Henderson had advised. It was tedious work. Thousands of entries to sift through. I almost missed it. A recurring monthly payment, always for the same amount, $1,500. The description was vague, just a series of numbers. It wasn't a car payment or a mortgage payment I recognized. It was an electronic transfer to another bank. My heart started to beat a little faster. I copied the transaction number and did a search. It was a payment for a property management company, a rental company. My hands trembled as I typed the company's name into a search engine. Their website was professional, listing dozens of apartment buildings they managed throughout the city. This was something. This was more than just dinners and flowers. This was a sustained, regular expense. I felt a cold dread creep over me. What was he paying for every single month? I dug deeper, cross-referencing the payment dates with Mark's calendar and our credit card bills. The pattern that emerged made me feel physically ill. On the days the payment went through, there were often other charges nearby. A grocery store in a neighborhood across town I rarely visited. A pharmacy. A hardware store. He wasn't just visiting this place, he was maintaining it. Records I rattled off Mark's date of birth and our home address, hoping it would be enough. She sighed, and I heard the clicking of a keyboard. "Okay, fine. That payment corresponds to Unit 7B at the Oakwood Apartments on Elm Street." Oakwood Apartments, a nondescript building in a part of town Mark had no reason to ever be in. I thanked her and hung up, my mind reeling. He had another place, a secret apartment. He and Chloe, they had a nest, a whole secret life they had built behind my back. I looked at the first payment date again. It was over a year ago, 18 months to be exact. This wasn't a recent mistake, this was a calculated, long-term affair. He had been leading a double life for a year and a half. The sheer scale of the deception took my breath away. He had woken up next to me every morning, kissed me goodbye, and then gone to live his other life with my sister. The sickness in my stomach was quickly replaced by a glacial calm. This was it. This was the proof. This was the weapon I needed. The anger I felt was so cold and so clear it was almost peaceful. He thought he had just broken my heart. He had no idea he had just handed me the key to his own destruction. I needed to see his face. I needed to look him in the eye and see how deep the lies went. I sent him a text message, the first I had initiated since the party. "I need to talk to you. Come to the house tomorrow at noon. Come alone." He replied almost instantly. "Of course, thank you, I'll be there." He probably thought I was softening, that I was ready to listen to his excuses. He had no idea what was waiting for him. The next day, I prepared myself for battle. I sent Emily to a friend's house, telling her I needed to handle some things with her father. I didn't want her to be there. I didn't want her to see the man he had become. When the doorbell rang at exactly noon, I took a deep breath and opened it. He stood on the porch, looking slightly more put together than he had the last time I'd seen him, but the desperation was still there in his eyes. I stepped aside and let him in without a word. We sat in the living room, the space between us charged with years of shared history and the raw wound of his betrayal. His eyes darting away from mine. A few months, he lied. It started about 4 months ago. It was stupid and it's over. I ended it. The ease with which the lie slipped from his lips was astonishing. I felt a flicker of the old pain, the sting of being so thoroughly duped by the person I trusted most in the world. But I pushed it down. This was not about my pain. This was about his downfall. I held his gaze, letting the silence stretch. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse him. I just asked a simple question. Are you sure about that? Something in my tone, in my stillness, must have unsettled him. A flicker of fear crossed his face. He had expected tears, yelling, a dramatic scene. He had not expected this calm, icy stranger sitting across from him. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice suddenly wary. "I mean, are you absolutely certain it was only a few months?" I repeated, my voice still quiet, still even. "You should think very carefully before you answer that, Mark." He stared at me, his mind clearly racing. What did I know? How could I know anything? He had been so careful. I could see the calculations in his eyes as he tried to figure out what I was holding back. The smug confidence he had walked in with was gone, replaced by a growing unease. It wasn't that long," he stammered, his lie now weaker, less convincing. I just nodded slowly, a small, sad smile on my face. "Okay, Mark. If that's your story," I stood up. "I think we're done here. My lawyer will be in touch with yours." I had planted the seed. He left the house not with a sense of relief, but with a gnawing sense of dread. He knew I knew more than I was saying, and he had no idea what it was. The power dynamic had shifted. I wasn't the weeping, hysterical wife anymore. I was the one with the secrets. A few days later, I got an unexpected phone call. It was from Mark's younger brother, David. David and I had always gotten along well. He was quieter and more thoughtful than Mark, and I knew he'd never been particularly fond of Chloe's dramatic personality. "Sarah?" "It's David," he said. Consulting firm was doing great. He was right. Our business, a small firm we'd started with my inheritance years ago, was incredibly successful. I'd been a silent partner for the last decade, focusing on raising Emily, but I still saw the quarterly reports. There were no money problems. "That is strange," I said, my mind starting to race. "We haven't had a slow quarter in 5 years." "Exactly," David said. "It just struck me as odd." He was talking like he was on the verge of bankruptcy. I don't know if it means anything, but with everything else that's come out, I thought you should know. Don't let him play the victim, Sarah. Don't let him tell you he's broke, because I have a feeling he's been planning something for a long time. After I hung up with David, I sat in silence for a long time, his words echoing in my head. Money problems. It didn't add up, unless the money wasn't disappearing because the business was slow, unless Mark was making it disappear. With a growing sense of dread, I went back to my laptop. As a co-founder and 50% owner of Peterson Consulting, I had full, unrestricted access to all of our business accounts. I just hadn't felt the need to look at them in detail for years. I had trusted him. I logged into the business banking portal. At first glance, everything looked normal. The revenue was strong, just as I'd expected. Client payments were coming in regularly. But David's warning had made me suspicious. I started digging deeper, not just looking at the top-line numbers, but at the expenditures. I opened the detailed transaction logs for the past 2 years. I spent hours poring over them, my eyes burning from staring at the screen. And then I found it. An anomaly. A series of payments to a vendor I didn't recognize. Apex Strategic Solutions. They were large payments, tens of thousands of dollars each, coded as subcontractor fees. But we didn't use subcontractors. Our firm was small, and we handled all our client work in-house. My blood ran cold. I searched for Apex Strategic Solutions online. Nothing. No website, no business registration, no address. The company didn't exist. My hands were shaking as I traced her. It was our money. Money I had helped earn. Money from a business started with my family's inheritance. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was stealing from me. He was planning to bleed our company dry, leave me with a failing business and no savings, and ride off into the sunset with my sister and a fortune he had stolen. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, it almost didn't feel real. It was the kind of thing that happened in movies, not to me, not in my quiet, suburban life. The rage that had been simmering inside me erupted into a full-blown inferno. This was no longer just about a broken heart. This was about war. He had tried to utterly destroy me, to leave me with nothing. He had underestimated me. He had mistaken my kindness for weakness. He was about to find out how wrong he was. While I was uncovering the depths of Mark's financial betrayal, Chloe was growing more and more desperate for a reaction from me. My silence was clearly driving her crazy. She couldn't stand not being the center of the story. Since I had blocked her number, she had resorted to other tactics. She had sent messages through mutual friends, saccharine notes about wanting to talk things through for the sake of the family. I had ignored them all. Her frustration finally boiled over one afternoon. I was in the kitchen, on the phone with Mr. Henderson, updating him on my discovery of the Shell Corporation, when I saw a car pull up aggressively to the curb. It was Chloe. "I have to go," I said quickly, hanging up the phone just as she started marching up the front path. She began banging on the door, her fist thudding against the wood. "Sarah! I know you're in there. Open this door. We need to talk." I stood in the entryway, my heart pounding with a mixture of anger and anxiety. I was not going to let her into my house. This was my sanctuary, and she had contaminated my life enough already. "Go away, Chloe," I called out, my voice firm. "I'm not leaving until you talk to me," she shrieked, her voice shrill and hysterical. "You can't just hide from this. Mark and I are having a baby. This baby is your niece or nephew. You have to accept it." Her words were like gasoline on the fire of my rage. The audacity, the sheer gall of her, I was done. I calmly walked back to the kitchen, picked up my phone, and dialed 911. "I'd like to report a disturbance," I said to the operator, my voice perfectly level. "There is a woman trespassing on my property, and she is refusing to leave. Yes, she's screaming and causing a scene." I gave them my address. Less than 10 minutes later, a police car rolled silently up to the curb. 2 officers got out, their expressions calm and professional. Chloe was still on the porch, now ranting about how I was stealing her happiness. She didn't even notice the police until they were walking up the lawn. "Ma'am, is there a problem here?" one of the officers asked. Chloe spun around, her face flushed and her eyes wild. "Yes, this is my sister's house, and she won't let me in. She's trying to keep me from my partner." "Ma'am, we've had a complaint that you're trespassing," the other officer said, his tone patient but firm. "The owner of this property has asked you to leave. If you don't leave now, we'll have to arrest you." The threat of arrest finally seemed to penetrate her self-induced drama. Her face paled. Humiliation washed over her features as she looked around and saw the neighbors watching from their windows. This was not the audience she had wanted. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, but the fight had gone out of her. She shot one last venomous look at my front door before turning and stalking back to her car. The officers watched until she had driven away before coming to the door. I opened it and thanked them. "I'm sorry to have bothered you," I said. "No bother at all, ma'am," the first officer said kindly. If she comes back, you call us right away." As I closed the door, I felt a strange sense of victory. Chloe had tried to shame me, to force a confrontation on her terms. Instead, she had ended up publicly humiliated, escorted away by the police like a common criminal. The police report filed for her harassment would be another piece of documentation, another small brick in the wall I was building around myself. I was no longer just defending. I was in control. The game had changed, and she and Mark were too stupid to even realize they were losing. With all the pieces in my possession, the picture was now terrifyingly complete. The 18-month affair. Confirmed parents and asked them to come over. I told them it was urgent. They arrived looking worried, expecting more emotional fallout. They were not prepared for what I was about to show them. I sat them down at the dining room table, the same table where I had uncovered Mark's crimes. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I calmly laid out the evidence, piece by piece, like a prosecutor presenting a case. First, I showed them the rental agreement for the apartment. I pointed to the start date. "It's been going on for a year and a half, Mom," I said, looking directly at her. "This wasn't a mistake. This was a second life." My mother's face went pale. The last of her excuses for Chloe evaporated into the air. Next, I told them about the scene Chloe had caused and the police report I had filed. "She tried to humiliate me in front of my neighbors," I said. "She screamed at me from my own front lawn." My father's jaw was tight, his knuckles white as he clenched his fists. He said nothing, but his silence was more damning than any shouting could have been. Finally, I brought out the bank statements from the business. I had printed them out, highlighting the transfers to the Shell Corporation. I showed them the document registering Mark as the sole signatory. "He stole from us," I said, my voice thick with a disgust that was beyond anger. "He has embezzled over $200,000 from the company we built together, a company we started with money from Grandma's inheritance." I let the papers sit on the table between us. The evidence was irrefutable. My mother stared at the statements, her eyes wide with horror. She finally looked up at me, tears welling. "Oh, Sarah," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I had no idea. I am so sorry. I've been such a fool." My father finally spoke, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "That man," he said, his voice shaking with rage, "will not get another penny from this family. He will not get another minute of our time. He is nothing to us now." He then turned his gaze to my mother. "And her, Carol. She is not the girl you thought she was. She is a viper. She made her choice." It was a turning point. The family dynamic, which had been skewed in Chloe's favor for decades, had finally conceivable angle. We could go to the police and have him charged with embezzlement. He would almost certainly go to prison. "However," Mr. Henderson said, steepling his fingers, "a criminal trial can be long, messy, and public. There is another way, a way that guarantees you get everything you are owed, and quickly." The plan he laid out was brilliant in its simplicity. We would arrange a four-way mediation meeting. Me and him, Mark and his lawyer. We would frame it as a standard divorce settlement negotiation. Mark would walk into that room expecting a fight over alimony and assets, thinking the worst of his problems was the baby he'd fathered with my sister. He would be arrogant, confident, ready to lowball me. He would have no idea that we held a financial nuclear bomb. "We let them make the first offer," Mr. Henderson explained. "We let him think he's in control. Then, we present the evidence of the affair. We show him we know about the apartment. That will rattle him. But he'll recover, thinking it's just a standard adultery claim. And then," a thin smile played on Mr. Henderson's lips, "we present the evidence of the embezzlement, and we inform him that this is no longer a divorce negotiation. It is his one and only chance to avoid federal prison." The trap was set. The date for the meeting was scheduled for the following week. The last person I needed to talk to was Emily. She had been staying with me, a quiet, sad presence in the house. The joy of her pregnancy had been overshadowed by the trauma of the betrayal. I owed her the full truth. We sat on the porch one evening, watching the sunset. I told her everything. About the length of the affair, about the secret apartment, about the money Mark had stolen, money that was part of her inheritance, too. I watched her face as she processed it all, her expression shifting from sorrow to a hard, steely resolve that reminded me of my own. She was silent for a long time when I finished. Then she looked at me, her eyes clear. "He's not the man I thought he was, Mom," she said quietly. "He's not my father anymore. Not really. And she is not my aunt." She placed a hand on her belly. "This baby will never know them." "I want to be there," she said, her voice stronger now. "Not in the room." I downtown. We didn't talk much on the way. There was nothing left to say. She squeezed my hand before I got out of the car. "You've got this, Mom," she whispered. I gave her a small smile and walked into the building, my back straight and my head held high. The conference room was as sterile and impersonal as I had imagined. Beige walls, a long mahogany table, uncomfortable chairs. Mr. Henderson was already there, arranging his files. I sat down next to him, my hands folded calmly on the table in front of me. A few minutes later, Mark and his lawyer walked in. Mark looked tired and stressed, but he managed a smug, confident expression when he saw me. His lawyer, a slick-looking man named Peterson, gave us a curt nod and sat down. They thought this was their arena. They thought they knew the rules of the game. Just as Mr. Henderson had predicted, Peterson started with a condescendingly generous offer. "Mark is prepared to offer significant spousal support, given the unfortunate circumstances," he said, sliding a piece of paper across the table. "He also wants to set up a trust for the child. He is willing to be very reasonable to ensure this process is as painless as possible." Mark sat back in his chair, a look of magnanimous sorrow on his face. It was a performance, and a pathetic one at that. He thought he was in a position of power, dispensing charity to the wife he had wronged. Mr. Henderson didn't even glance at the paper. He simply pushed it back across the table. "We're not interested in your client's performance of generosity," he said, his voice mild. "Let's start with the facts, shall we?" He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single document, placing it in the center of the table. It was the lease agreement for the apartment on Elm Street. "Let's start with this," Mr. Henderson said calmly. "A year-and-a-half-long affair, complete with a secret residence, is not an unfortunate circumstance. It is a calculated, premeditated deception. So let's dispense with the fiction that your client made a simple mistake." Mark's face fell. I watched the color drain from his cheeks for the second time in as many weeks. Which brings us to the more serious matter. He reached into his briefcase again. This time, he brought out a thick file folder. He opened it and began to lay out pages one by one on the table. They were the bank statements from the business, the highlighted transfers, the registration documents for Apex Strategic Solutions, the evidence of the Shell Corporation. He laid them out in a neat, damning row. "This," Mr. Henderson said, his voice dropping, losing its mildness and taking on a hard, sharp edge, "is the real reason we are here today." The room went utterly silent. Mark stared at the papers, his face turning from pale to a ghastly shade of gray. He looked like he was going to be sick. His lawyer, Peterson, leaned forward, his eyes widening in disbelief as he realized what he was looking at. He snatched up one of the pages, then another. His professional composure completely crumbled. He looked at Mark with a mixture of fury and horror. "What is this?" he hissed. "What did you do?" Mark couldn't speak. He just sat there, transfixed by the proof of his crimes, laid bare on the polished table. "This isn't a divorce negotiation anymore, gentlemen," Mr. Henderson said, his voice like ice. "This is a discussion about whether my client goes to the police and files a report for felony embezzlement, a crime that carries a sentence of up to 10 years in a federal penitentiary." The reversal was absolute. The power in the room had shifted so completely, so suddenly, it was almost tangible. Mark, who had walked in minutes ago thinking he held all the cards, was now staring at the complete and utter ruin of his life. It was then that I spoke for the first time. I leaned forward, my eyes locking with Mark's. My voice was quiet, cold, and steady. "You were going to steal everything from me," I said, each word a carefully placed stone. "Everything from our daughter. You were going to leave me with nothing, and you were going to do it with my sister. You thought I was stupid. You thought I wouldn't notice." I let that hang in the air for a moment. "Now," I continued, my voice dropping even lower, "you are going to give me everything. Or I will send you to prison, and I will not baby to be paid from whatever personal funds he had left. He would sign a no-contact order, legally barring him from ever approaching or communicating with me or Emily again. If you sign these papers right now," Mr. Henderson concluded, "my client will agree not to press criminal charges for the embezzlement. This is your only offer. You have 5 minutes to decide." Peterson read through the documents quickly. He looked at his client, his face a mask of disgust. "Sign it," he said through gritted teeth. "You have no choice." With a trembling hand, Mark picked up the pen. He didn't look at me. He couldn't. He signed away his business, his savings, his future. He signed away his right to ever see his daughter or grandchild again. He signed away his entire life, all in the space of a few minutes. When it was done, we stood up. Mr. Henderson gathered our copies of the documents. I walked to the door without a backward glance. As we stepped into the hallway, we saw Chloe. She had been waiting, pacing anxiously. She must have thought she'd be called in to lend her support, to be a part of their victory. Her face lit up when she saw Mark. "What happened?" she asked eagerly, rushing toward him. "Did we win?" "Did you get a good deal?" Mark just stared at her, his eyes empty and dead. He looked like a ghost. I paused, turning to face my sister one last time. I didn't look at Mark. I looked directly at her. "It's over," I said, my voice calm and clear. "He's ruined." I let a small, cold smile touch my lips. "You hitched your wagon to a thief, Chloe. And now you have nothing. He has nothing to give you. Enjoy your baby." I turned and walked away, down the long hallway toward the elevators where my daughter was waiting for me. I didn't look back to see the dawning horror on her face as the reality of what she had done, what they had lost, finally crashed down upon her. I didn't need to. I could feel it. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. It was the cold, clean peace of justice finally served. The aftermath apparently still with him, but from what I hear, it's a nightmare. They fight constantly. He blames her, she blames him. He paused. He got what he deserved. And you got justice. I'm glad. If you or Emily ever need anything at all, you call me. That conversation brought a sense of closure. Mark wasn't just defeated. He was facing real, lasting consequences, and his own family was turning their back on him. My own family, meanwhile, was drawing closer around me. I had dinner with my parents a few nights later. It was the first time since the revelation that we didn't talk about the drama. We talked about the baby, about my plans for the business. My mother was different. The crisis had stripped away her need to placate and smooth things over. She was more direct, more present. At one point, my father reached across the table and put his hand over mine. "We're proud of you, Sarah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You handled an impossible situation with strength and grace." He looked at my mother, who nodded in agreement, her eyes shining with tears. "We haven't always been fair to you." We let Chloe's noise take up too much space. That's over now. From now on, Our focus is here, with you and Emily and this new baby. They told me they had cut Chloe off completely. They had changed their phone numbers and sent her one final letter, telling her that until she took full responsibility for her actions and sought professional help, they could not have her in their lives. It was the hardest decision they had ever had to make, my mother said, but they knew it was the right one. They were finally choosing their healthy daughter over their toxic one. My best friend, Jessica, took me out for a celebratory dinner. We went to a quiet Italian restaurant and shared a bottle of expensive wine. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass. "To getting even," I replied, clinking my glass against hers with a smile. "You did it," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "You didn't just fall apart. You fought back. You won." "I did," I said, a sense of wonder in my own voice. "And I'd do it again." Life began to move forward. I threw myself into running the consulting firm. It was a challenge, taking over unit. We were whole. My life settled into a new, peaceful rhythm. I was a business owner, a mother, a grandmother. My house, which had once felt like a crime scene, was now filled with the happy sounds of a baby's laughter. The ghosts of Mark and Chloe had been banished. Then, about a year after the baby shower, a letter arrived. It was addressed to me in Chloe's familiar, loopy handwriting. I almost threw it away unopened, but a flicker of curiosity made me pause. I slit the envelope open with a kitchen knife. The letter was a rambling, desperate plea. It was filled with self-pity and blame. Mark had left her a few months after their baby was born. He had moved to another state, wanting nothing to do with her or their son. She was alone, living in a tiny, run-down apartment, struggling to make ends meet on a waitress's salary. She wrote that she was sorry, but the words felt hollow, a means to an end. The letter ended with a desperate request for money, for forgiveness, for a way back into the family. I read the letter twice, standing there in my sun-drenched kitchen. I thought about the woman who had written it, the sister who had so gleefully tried to destroy my life. I thought about the smug look on her face at the baby shower, the cruelty in her text messages, the hysteria in her voice on my front lawn. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, no satisfaction. Just a vast, empty space where my love for her used to be. She was a stranger to me now, a character in a sad story that no longer had anything to do with my own. I calmly took the letter, tore it into 4 neat pieces, and dropped it into the kitchen trash can. I turned and walked into the living room, where Emily was playing on the floor with her daughter. The baby looked up at me and gave me a wide, toothless grin. I smiled back. They had chosen their path. I had chosen mine. My revenge wasn't a single, fiery moment in a lawyer's office. It was this. It was the quiet, happy, successful life I had built for myself on the rubble of the one they had tried to burn down. They had wanted to make me small, to leave me with nothing. And in the end, they were the ones who had lost everything. They finally learned what it feels like to be nothing at all, and I never